Hi, my name is Mandy Gatesman. I'm a clinical oncology pharmacist at VCU Medical Center, where all I do is take care of cancer patients. And so I hope that you're excited to learn a little bit more about cancer myths, the pharmacy edition. There'll be upcoming ones that are specific to other specialties, but I'm going to do a couple that are specific to pharmacy. So we're going to jump right in and get started. So the first myth I hear a lot is that natural products are safer than prescription drugs. And unfortunately, this is a myth that I'm not saying that natural products cannot be used or are not cannot be safe, but to make the statement that natural products are safer than prescription drugs is unfortunately untrue. Prescription drugs, the approval process for prescription drugs is long and arduous. It can take 10 to 15 years or even more for a prescription drug to make it to market. And during that time, it's going through very rigorous testing. So there's basic science of, in the benchtop where people are studying how these drugs affect certain cells in the body. And then it will move to preclinical testing, where it will be studied again in a laboratory in different ways. Then it moves into clinical testing, which are typically in humans. So once it gets through those kind of preclinical stages, if they think that they've got a good proof of concept that this might work in this particular area, then they will study that drug in humans. And typically it's hundreds, if not thousands of humans that will be tested prior to the drug entering the market. And during that time, they're looking in phase 1, 2, and 3 studies. They're looking for safety first. So they'll give it to patients, sometimes those that have the disease, sometimes healthy volunteers, where they'll just look to see what kind of side effects these drugs might cause. And once they get a handle on how well patients will tolerate it, then at that point, they'll move into testing to see whether or not it's actually going to work. So they'll recruit even more people, those that have the disease that they're looking to use the drug in, and they'll test it in those patients. And typically, they're using it in relation to a placebo arm. So that would mean that you enroll in the trial and you could either be randomized to either receive the new treatment or to receive a placebo or some other standard of care. And within that randomization, the people who are conducting the study are often blinded to the result or to the study group. So they don't know who's receiving the placebo or who's receiving the standard of care and who's receiving the new drug that they're trying to bring to market. And by randomizing patients and by using placebos and blinding, all of those things help the researchers to be as unbiased as possible when evaluating the new drug to come to market. So if it passes muster in all of those preclinical and clinical testing, it will then be reviewed by the FDA. And that can take a couple of years too for them to look through all of that data that the companies have evaluated or have got together. And then from there, they'll make a decision whether it should come to market or not. Once it comes to market, or once it's approved to come to market, then it will make sure to go through good manufacturing processes so that everybody knows that the conditions in which the drug is being created are safe and that there's not going to be some excess materials that are going to go into it, that making sure that the amount that's listed on the package is actually what's in there and not a higher dose or a lower dose than we think that we're going to give. So after all of that stuff, then the drug finally comes to market. So that takes many, many, many years for that to happen. And so with all of those quality checks, we can be pretty assured that whenever we go to give a prescription drug that we know what's in it, how much is in it, likely the side effects that we're going to see, and likely whether or not it's going to work. Now, that's not to say any of that is 100%. There's certainly room for error in any of those things. And once we start using it in more people, we see more things. Once we start using it in people that might not have been studied in the trials, then we might see more things. But in general, we have some assurances of what we're working with when that drug comes to trial. Natural products, on the other hand, are not regulated by the FDA. They're under their own laws within the USA law books. And so they're not subject to any of that. They don't have to go through any testing for efficacy. So you don't really have to prove that it works. They don't have to go through any particular testing to prove that it's safe. And they don't have to go through any testing to prove that the manufacturing location is up to snuff, that it's doing that they're manufacturing it with good manufacturing processes and making sure that what's in there, what's on the label is actually what's in there at the dose that it's labeled at, and that there's nothing in there that's not already written on the label. So that's where we come down to the question of if natural products are safer than prescription drugs. From just a quality assurance process, the answer is no. If they were to be regulated in a more scientific way, then we would have a lot better comparison to be able to make. But there's been lots of unfortunate cases where natural products have been recalled from the market because of either untoward side effects. So, having side effects in patients that were unexpected or were extreme and, could lead to death, or that the product itself was actually had excipients in it or some other thing in it that actually caused harm, or that there was more in there than what it was supposed to be. And then there's also been reports where independent labs have taken natural products, looked at them from a chemical perspective to try to see, is what's on the label actually in there? And a lot of the time, more than 30% of the time, the answer is no, that they can't even either find the active ingredient that they say is in there, or it's at a much, much lower dose than what is labeled on the product. So there's unfortunately some variation about the products that you might find on the market. So how do we make these natural products, or how do we choose natural products that might be safer for us? And that would be looking for some particular labeling on the package themselves. So there can be some independent groups that can look and see whether or not those products have what they're supposed to have in them and don't have what they're not supposed to have in them. So you can look for things USP as a label on there, that they've been approved from the US Pharmacopoeia, and they have quality assurance processes that they go through. Consumer Labs also is an independent company that can either be contracted by the manufacturer themselves to independently look and make sure that the quality is there in the product that they're receiving. So those would be two specific labeling that you can look for on your products to make sure that they're what you want to have in there. So I would highly encourage you that if you're going to look for natural products, to look for those types of things and not just order off of Amazon and just whatever shows up at your door, just assume that it is what it is, because that's not always true. And just to kind of circle back to when I was talking about some of the quality assurances, especially through the clinical trials for patients, that when we talk about that blinded thing that I talked about, that's a very kind of specific medical term that we throw around in clinical trials. And what that means is that the researcher does not know whether or not the patient who's enrolled in a clinical trial, they don't know which treatment arm they are assigned to. So they don't know whether they got the study arm or if they got the standard of care arm or the placebo arm. They're blinded to that treatment assignment. And so by being blinded to the treatment assignment, they can't bring in their own personal biases about wanting to make sure that this drug succeeds and makes it to market. They're coming into it. That blinding takes away their personal bias about that. So that adds a layer of assurance to us when we read those trials and when we assess those trials to make sure that that we're narrowing it down, that drug is working as well as it can with the least amount of side effects it can. All right, so moving on to our next myth. It's the myth number 2 is I can't take natural products with my other cancer treatment. So after all that discussion about are natural products as safe as prescription products, and ultimately the answer globally is probably not, that now you're like, well, what happens if I want to take these drugs? Is it okay that I take them? And in general, what we know is that if you're taking natural products, as long as you're taking them in conjunction with other prescribed cancer treatments, so that you're using it in conjunction with, if surgery is recommended, that you're getting that surgery, or if radiation is recommended or chemotherapy is recommended. As long as you're using it in conjunction with those things and not in place of those things, that you can, in general, take these products safely. There was a very large study that was done looking mostly at patients who had common solid tumors, so things like breast cancer and prostate cancer, colorectal cancer, and looking at patients who decided to take natural products along with their cancer treatments. And in general, they had similar outcomes of their cancer treatments if they were taking natural products or if they weren't. Where we run into problems is if we are delaying surgery or radiation or chemotherapy in order to try natural products alone. So our recommendation would be that if you're interested in using natural products, that's okay. Use them in conjunction with your other prescribed treatments, but also be very upfront with your care team about the natural products that you're taking. Think of it as any other prescription drug that you're taking, because just like prescription drugs, natural products can also have drug interactions where they might not play well in the sandbox with some other therapies that you're taking, might make them more, might make you have more side effects, or might make the other treatment not work as well. The other thing is that if you have a hematologic malignancy, so one that affects your blood, so things like leukemia, lymphoma, some multiple myelomas, those types of diseases, in general, the treatments that we give for those make your white blood cell, your immune systems go down farther than what happens typically with solid tumor treatments. And so because of that, you might be at more risk for certain infections, or if the product itself isn't well manufactured and there's a potential for there to be some bad things in that product, that you might be at higher risk of having infections and bad side effects and stuff from that. So I usually use a little bit more caution in patients who have those hematologic malignancies like leukemia and lymphoma, rather than usually that we have a little bit more flexibility in the solid tumor side. So if you the typical breast cancer, prostate cancer, colorectal cancer, those types of things. So ultimately, all that to be said is that if you want to use natural products along with your cancer treatments, just talk to your care team about it. Even if they're not very well versed in the natural product that you're looking to use, because there's a ton of them, so it's really hard to keep up with all of that information as well. Just be prepared to write it down and give it to them at your visit, and then they give them a chance to either look through it or contact their local friendly oncology pharmacist to help them work through it, and we can come up with a plan together about how to safely use those agents. And then I would also caution that if you are going to use them together, to make sure that if you change it, stop it, start something new, any of those things, to also let your care team know about that, just to make sure that we can kind of keep that in mind as we're monitoring you through your treatment, that if something changes, then maybe we can start digging a little bit deeper into the natural product side, just so that we can have the full picture. So again, take home message for this one is, if you want to use natural products, you can use them in general along with your other prescribed cancer treatments. Just absolutely be upfront with your providers about that, so that you can have a good discussion about how that might work together, and then they can take into account any specific needs or considerations for you as a specific patient in your particular case. All right. Let's move right along into the next one. The next myth is that I'm going to get every side effect from my treatment. So I get this a lot, because when we have to talk to patients about their chemotherapy, it can be really overwhelming, the amount of side effects that you see listed and the ones that we talk to you about. And that can really make it difficult to want to make that decision to go forward with that treatment. So I just want to put it out there that we know a lot about what can happen, but the time that you're getting the chemotherapy as the patient, that's the first time that you've ever received that. So you weren't involved in the studies. And so everybody's case is a little bit different. So we'll tell you what we typically see, what is likely to be expected, but that's not to say that you're going to get every single one of those. So just kind of try to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt and just take it one cycle, one day at a time, see what pops up. And there's, anytime something that comes up that is unexpected or that you're not sure about, just always ask about that, because there's a lot of things that we can do on our side in order to help you through this whole process and decide whether or not, yes, this is potentially a side effect of your chemo, or this might be unrelated to the chemo and it could be due to something else. So ultimately, again, just a really open line of communication with your care team about things that you're experiencing, so that we can help you manage, but try not to become overwhelmed at the start when you're reading through this very long list of chemotherapy side effects, because it can be very overwhelming at the start. But in general, most people don't get every one. So we'll just take it a day at a time, and we'll definitely try to help support you through it. That's what we're all here for, is to help you get through it as best you can. All right, and then moving on to our very last one is myth number 4, that I need to tough out these side effects. So some people think that, yeah, I don't want all of these things, but if I have them, then I'm going to let my body do its thing to try to heal me, to make sure that I, don't take some of these other drugs that I've been given to help to offset some of these side effects. I'm just going to try to tough this out and go through it. And we would really advise against that. We know that chemotherapy causes side effects. It's just the way that it is. Immune therapy causes side effects. Oral chemotherapy causes side effects. Radiation causes side effects. Surgery causes side effects. And so what we've done really well over the years is design ways to make those treatments be more tolerable for people, so that you have a better chance of having a good outcome if you can continue on treatment. So let us help you through that. Let us, take this knowledge that we've gained over, all of these years that we've treated patients, and let us help you through that. So if you have a little bit of nausea, go ahead and take the nausea medication, see if it helps. Yeah, those are maybe going to have some side effects too, but if you can get that nausea under control, then you can eat, then you can drink, then you have more energy, and it's all kind of related. So don't feel like you have to tough it out. And also don't feel like you can't call us and ask us, what can I do? I'm having this side effect. I don't remember anything that you told me about to try to help me through this. Is there anything that I can do to try to help this particular thing that I'm experiencing? So, sometimes we got some crazy tricks up our sleeve that we can help with. And unfortunately, sometimes we're just going to have to say, you just might need to tough that one out. But in general, just ask the question, because we can usually find something to kind of ease that and help you through it. So I'll be a broken record of just open lines of communication with your care team and asking the question and keeping us, abreast of everything that's going on with your treatment, so that we can help you through it. And those are all of the myths that I have to share with you today for Pharmacy Edition. It's been great talking with you, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and thanks for tuning in.